Elijah stared numbly at his feet. The chair beneath him was hard, the wood floor beneath that dusty and warped with age. The cold in the room pressed against his skin, not sharp, but ever present, like a breath on the back of his neck. He was aware of all of it, but none of it mattered, not compared to the thoughts gnawing at him. He knew that they weren't safe here. Not truly, not Florence and not himself. But what choice did he have? There was nowhere else to go, no better option. His hands moved without thought, fingers tracing the surface of a small, rusted key. It clicked softly between his fingertips, its weight deceptively light. His vision blurred as he stared down, as though the world itself had grown untrustworthy. Why? He thought again. Why did I trust her life to him? To Angus, to the man who had once spit her name like a curse, demoness, pagan, filth. What kind of game was the chief minister playing? Why orchestrate that chaos? Why construct an execution only to save her? Why sacrifice so many innocent lives, Diane, the protesters, his own saints, just to spirit one girl away? Of course, Elijah knew why. That was what troubled him most. His fingers stopped moving. He lifted the key, brought it close to his eyes, staring at its corroded teeth. There was something terrible about it now. Something real. And then he remembered the moment he had received it. The prisoner had exhaled all the air from his lungs the moment the blow landed, a brutal punch to the stomach. His hands were cuffed behind his back, leaving his chest completely exposed. Helpless. The second strike came, lower this time, to the ribs already sore from earlier beatings. Pain shot through him like lightning. His knees buckled. The two hell-bound saints who'd been holding him let go, letting his body drop like dead weight to the ground. Whatever support he could muster came from sheer will alone. And then Angus crouched, lowered himself, deliberately, to Elijah's level, and hit him again and again. The same place, over and over, ruthless, mechanical. Elijah squirmed, trying to brace, trying to breathe, cursing under his breath with what little air he had left. It was during those moments, somewhere between the fists and the agony, that he'd felt it. The small ring of keys, pressed discreetly into his palm, metal, cold, small. He couldn't remember when, whether it was during the first blow or the third, whether it was slipped into his hand by accident or ritual, but they were there. The keys to his cuffs, the key to the Cadillac, and the key to Florence's handcuffs. And Angus had put them there, not out of mercy, not out of any goodwill. No, Angus wanted him to play along, to act the part in whatever dark theatre the chief minister had constructed around Florence's escape, the trial, the riot, the deaths, all for her. So many people locked away, so many dragged to the pit, all so Florence Loper could live. And now he, Elijah, held the weight of that plan in his hand, held the burden Angus had passed to him like a curse. He glanced across the room. Florence lay unconscious on a worn, second-hand sofa opposite him. Her breath was shallow, her brow tense. Even asleep, she looked uneasy, hunted. And yet there was something impossibly innocent about her. Fragile. Still. A girl wrapped in shadows she never asked for. Elijah's eyes burned. He tightened his fist around the key. Her. The image of her was always there, on the edge of every thought, every breath, and with it, the echo of the chief minister's words.
Do you see, Elijah? It's not so hard to think with your head for a change, and act only when the time is right. Remember this lesson well. It may yet save your pitiful existence one day.
The words rang like scripture in his skull. Even now, Elijah could still feel the heat of the flames, the chaos erupting around the pit when Diane arrived, when she drove her car into the crowd, scattering saints and protesters like startled birds. But even that, he realized bitterly, had been part of Angus's design. Diane, brave, loyal, heartsick Diane, had never stood a chance. There were too many hell-bound saints, too many weapons, too many eyes. Her death had been as predictable as the rising of the moon. Elijah clenched his jaw. He saw it now. That moment of madness, the eruption of screams, fire, resistance, that had been the moment Angus meant for him to act, to slip the cuffs, to escape, to climb into the minister's own black Cadillac, conveniently positioned, fully fueled. The car had cut through the trees like a blade. Elijah had floored it, eyes burning, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Florence had slumped unconscious in the passenger seat beside him, her head lolled against the window. And behind them, pursuit. 3 hell-bound saints in one car. They had been gaining. He remembered the cold certainty of it. They would die, the girl and him, executed on the run, until... Elijah watched in shock as one of the hell-bound saints turned on the others. In a flurry of steel and motion, he killed the 2 men, one clean through the chest, the other across the throat. It was over in seconds, and then only one hell-bound saint remained. Not friend, not enemy, just one man. The killer of the other 2 saints, now driving alone, now chasing them still. It hadn't been long before the lone pursuer signaled for Elijah to pull over. Elijah's hands tightened on the wheel. He had considered driving harder, trying to outrun him, but the car was damaged. Florence was unconscious, so Elijah pulled over. He felt ready, at least in theory, to fight. As the hellbound saint approached and yanked open the driver's side door, Elijah raised a fist, instinct burning through exhaustion. But his swing was weak. Sluggish. The saint blocked it easily.
"I'm not here to fight,"
his still raised in defense. Elijah swung again, blocked again.
"I said I'm here to help."
The words stopped Elijah more than the man's grip did. Breathing hard, he slumped forward, resting his head against the steering wheel.
"Why?"
The saint didn't hesitate.
"Chief Minister's orders."
Elijah blinked, frowned. But what choice did he have? An hour later, they arrived at a clearing deep in the woods. The house, large, quiet, made of old pine and stone, sat surrounded by trees like watchmen. It was far too peaceful, too deliberate.
"This is the Chief Minister's cabin."
He stepped out of the vehicle and opened the back door.
"You'll be safe here, until Angus arrives."
That doesn't sound very safe to me.
The hell-bound saint turned on him with a glare. Beneath his thick, furrowed brows, his eyes sparked with irritation.
"You made quite a scene today, and you should thank God, or whoever still listens to you, that he sent you such a powerful ally as the Chief Minister."
He stepped closer, boots crunching the pine needles underfoot.
"Otherwise you'd both be dead by now."
Elijah's jaw tightened. The man continued, unmoved.
"Chief Minister's orders are clear. You are to stay here until he can reach you."
He gestured toward Florence's slumped figure in the passenger seat.
"All the saints of New York currently know what you both look like, and think you are dead. And if you are seen with that lifeless girl in your charge..."
He shook his head.
"My advice, boy. Obey your savior."
With a grunt, he reached into his coat and tossed Elijah a set of old brass keys. They clattered against his chest and fell into his lap. Then the saint turned away, heading back toward his own car.
"What about you?"
The man didn't even turn around.
"Don't worry about me. I'm being paid to cover this up."
And then he drove off, tires whispering against forest soil, his figure disappearing into the trees like a spectre. Elijah parked the car beside a tree. The engine clicked softly as it cooled. The forest dark and still around them. Gently, he lifted Florence into his arms. Her weight was feather-light. He could feel every jut of bone beneath her skin. The house was cold when he entered, big, old, hollow. A holiday cabin, the saint had said. It felt like a mausoleum. He laid her carefully on the sofa, adjusting the cushions beneath her head. Then, without another word, he collapsed into the chair opposite. And there he remained. Outside, the sky had long since turned black. Inside, the silence thickened. Elijah sat frozen, motionless in the hard-backed chair, still dressed in his thin white prison shirt. He was freezing, but he didn't move. He didn't even shiver. He just stared. Florence lay across from him, still unconscious, her breathing shallow. She looked calm, peaceful, almost not of this world. There was something haunting in her stillness, something graceful, untouched by the filth and fire they'd just escaped, as if her soul had slipped away in the night, leaving behind only a beautiful, broken shell. But the shell bore scars. Her skin, pale as ivory, had long forgotten the sun. Her feet, bare and bruised, were darkened from days of torment. Her golden hair fell in a tangled halo around her shoulders, contrasting violently with the red cushions beneath her. The red looked too much like blood. Elijah sighed, a long, aching breath. He rubbed both palms into his eyes, trying to clear the blur of exhaustion, hunger, guilt. Then he looked at her again, and it still didn't feel real. It felt like a dream drawn in smoke, or worse, like watching an angel be devoured by hell slowly. And yet, the sight before him was more than tragic. It was unbearable. She looked so fragile, so terribly small. Even in her unconsciousness, maybe especially then, she seemed to hover between worlds. Her stillness wasn't peaceful anymore, it was worrisome. She barely seemed to breathe. But even in that vulnerable state, her body had not abandoned its shape. The curves of her form, outlined by the thin white fabric of the prison scrubs, were stark against the crimson of the cushions. The shirt was damp in places, nearly translucent with wear. It revealed far more than Elijah had expected to see. He looked away, then back. Her collarbone was pale and exposed, rising delicately with each slow breath. His gaze dropped lower, unbidden. He hated himself for it. The line of her chest was visible through the fabric, every soft contour, the faintest texture of skin. Even the fine hair on her forearms rose from the cold. She must be freezing. His eyes fell lower again, tracing the curve of her legs, the shadow of her stomach, the shape of her body made clear by how thin the material had become. He swallowed hard. This wasn't lust. Not truly. It was desperation misfiring. A body pulled toward warmth, toward life, toward the terrible comfort of flesh when everything else had burned. He clenched his jaw and stood abruptly, shaking himself out of the trance. "She needs a blanket," he told himself. "She's freezing, that's all." He crossed the room and found a folded grey wool blanket on a nearby shelf. With trembling hands he brought it back and carefully draped it over her form. His fingers hovered near her shoulder as he tucked it in, and then,
"Don't."
The word was barely more than breath. Florence's lips moved slowly, trembling.
"Don't. Please."
Her eyes didn't open, but her voice was full of pleading, helpless, frightened. Elijah froze, his hands still resting over the blanket, not touching her. Just there, she was waking, and even unconscious, her body had remembered fear. He paused mid-motion.
"Please, don't go."
The voice was faint, feather-light, and Elijah wasn't sure whether she was truly awake or slipping through some fevered dream. Her eyes remained closed, her skin flushed. Still he didn't move.
"Stay with me."
Then, light fingers, trembling, found his shoulders, guiding him. He allowed himself to be drawn toward her, carefully, hesitantly. Her grip was barely there, but insistent, pulling him down to sit beside her. Her hands reached for his neck, and before he could react, she pressed her forehead to his.
"Do whatever you want to me. Torture me. Abuse me. I give up. Angus, I belong to you."
Elijah's body went still, and then her lips met his, soft, searching, resigned. But something about the sensation was wrong. Too smooth, too young, no beard. Her eyes fluttered open, and she jerked back.
"Elijah?"
She was suddenly alert, her voice clearer. He stared at her, startled. Before he could speak, she was upright, dizzy, pale, but suddenly full of words.
"What happened? Where am I? Was I unconscious? For how long?"
She looked around. panic beginning to rise in her eyes.
What time is it? What happened?
It's all right, Florence.
His voice was hollow, struggling to process the remnants of her earlier words, those pleading whispers meant for another man, the promises, the surrender. He shook it off.
You should rest. You've been through too much for one day. But we're safe now.
Florence stared ahead blankly.
They were going to push me into the pit of hellfire.
The words were coming slowly, evenly, as if she were repeating a story someone else had told her. Then she blinked.
And you were imprisoned by Angus.
I was. But we both made it out. You fainted. Diane tried to get to you, and in the chaos, I managed to free myself, got into a car, took you with me.
He stopped there. That was all he said, but the rest echoed silently between them. He didn't mention the key, or the mass arrests, or the way Angus had engineered their escape like a playwright writing a final act. Florence's brow furrowed.
Diane, what happened to her? Is she also here?
Elijah froze. Damn, he hadn't meant to say her name. Not yet. Not like this. He would tell Florence everything, of course, but not now. Not when she was still pale and trembling and barely out of the dark.
I'm sorry, Florence. She's dead.
Florence went very still. The words landed like a stone in a still lake. She shivered visibly, as if her body had only just realized it was cold. Then, quietly, without drama, she pushed Elijah gently away from her and sat up. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just sat, like the silence itself was louder than any scream. She sat upright on the sofa, her breath hitching. Then her brown eyes, wide and wet, locked onto Elijah's, and the tears began to spill.
I remember she was stabbed in the neck.
Her hands clenched in her lap.
I was about to be pushed into the hellfire. I remember the smoke, the crowd, the saints everywhere.
She blinked hard, as if trying to push back the memory, but it was there now, vivid, unshakable.
She came for me. Diane. She found me. She tried to save me, but there were too many. One of them, he stabbed her, while she handed me to you.
Florence's voice cracked. She turned her face away from Elijah, unable to bear his expression.
She was hurt because of me.
She closed her eyes, willing the image away.
Oh, please, please, Elijah. Tell me she didn't die because of me.
Elijah's throat tightened. He didn't want to say it, but he couldn't lie.
Florence, Diane was mortally wounded. She died from her injuries before she reached the dungeons.
There was a pause. Then her breath broke into a sob, a single, miserable sound that seemed to shake the whole cabin.
I'm sorry, my darling.
He moved closer, carefully, and pulled her into his arms. She didn't resist. He cradled her against his chest, her face buried in the folds of his prison shirt. His hand moved gently across her back as her tears soaked into the fabric. Time passed. He wasn't sure how long. The fire had gone out. The world had grown quiet again. She kept asking the same questions, her voice smaller, thinner each time.
Was Diane in pain? Where are my friends now? Did the saints catch them?
Again and again, the same cycle. Guilt, loss, confusion. But not once did she ask about him. Not directly, not about Angus, and yet, in every pause, every long silence, Elijah could feel the ache behind her voice. She didn't need to say his name. She was still listening for it. Elijah, for his part, continued to answer her questions, gently, carefully, and with increasing skill. He avoided every mention of the minister, of Angus. It was becoming second nature now, skirting the truth, softening edges, painting escape as survival without ever revealing the architect behind it all. But then...
Where are we now?
The repetition of her earlier grief was broken. Her voice was clear, quiet, but direct. Elijah froze for the briefest moment. He wasn't ready for that one. He met her gaze, softening his features, and reached out. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingertips brushing her cheek.
You've had too much stress for one day. Don't worry. From now on, I'll take care of you.
His thumb lingered against her skin.
We're safe here. No one will think to look for you in this place.
He smiled. Small. Reassuring.
That's all you need to know.
No one will ever find her here. But what if she wanted to be found? The thought came sharp and shameful. Florence felt her stomach twist. No! That was madness. He was the reason she'd been sentenced, the reason Diane was dead, the reason so many had been arrested, and she didn't even know how many, didn't want to know. And yet, the thought of him still cracked something open inside her. That voice, that power, that look, she clenched her fists against it. Poison, that's all it was, poison, curling in through the holes left by pain.
Florence.
She blinked and looked at him again, this time really seeing him.
You're too exhausted. You need rest, a proper rest.
He nodded toward the back of the cabin.
One of those doors leads to a bedroom. Go, get some sleep.
Florence just nodded. Her limbs ached. Her mind felt like it was treading water. With Elijah's gentle support, she rose slowly to her feet and moved toward one of the doors. But as they passed the window, she froze. There, just outside, parked beneath the trees in the quiet dark, the black Cadillac, his car.
What's wrong?
His car, Elijah. That's Angus's car.
He didn't flinch. Instead, he pressed a soft kiss to her forehead.
Calm down, my darling. He'll never hurt you again. I promise you that.
She looked at him, unsure, untrusting.
This was the first car I could grab in the chaos earlier today. We fled to our freedom, in his car.
The words echoed strangely in her ears.
He'll never hurt you again. We fled to our freedom, in his car. His car.
Florence stared at it through the window. A chill went down her spine.
You're too tired to think straight. You need sleep.
She nodded numbly, and so, supported by the former chaplain, she let herself be led down the hallway, through the quiet door into a stranger's bedroom. But a part of Angus was already here. The car, the cabin, this place. Something about it unsettled her, deeply, viscerally, but not only from fear. Before she had awakened from her faint, somewhere in the haze of unconsciousness, she had been dreaming, not of escape, not of Elijah, but of Angus, of the first night they made love, of rain streaming from a black sky and thunder crashing around them like applause, of being pulled into his arms like a force of nature had claimed her. The memory struck hard, uninvited and dangerous. She pushed it away, but it clung. It was past midnight. Florence had been asleep for 2 hours now, curled softly on the bed Elijah had laid her on. She looked peaceful. He did not. Elijah sat near the door, jaw tight, shoulders tense. His eyes were red-rimmed, his breath shallow. He couldn't sleep. No matter how heavy his limbs felt, no matter how much his body ached, he couldn't allow it. Because this wasn't safety. Not really. He knew she couldn't stay here for long. Sooner or later, Florence would ask the question he didn't want to answer. She'd figure it out. The cabin, the car, the truth. That this house, this refuge, belonged to the man who had almost killed her. And when that moment came, there would be no easy lie. No gentle way to untangle the web he'd already started weaving. Or worse, the minister might return, might show up at the door, all robes and cold certainty, to collect what he no doubt saw as his. And then, God only knew what would happen. Elijah's jaw clenched tighter. She couldn't find out. Not ever. Not because he wanted to deceive her, but because he wanted to protect her. Because she wasn't herself right now. He could see it in her eyes. In the way she'd whispered Angus's name. in the way her lips had found his in confusion and surrender. She was confused, clouded by pain, by trauma, by years of being under that man's spell. Now it was his turn, Elijah's, to look after her, to shield her from the thing she still couldn't see clearly. He could imagine it so vividly now. Them together, away from all of this, from fire, from cathedrals, from blood and collars and chains. He would care for her, completely, gently, and that old sadist, Angus, could never hurt her again. She'd never have to feel that fear, that twisted devotion, that hunger for someone who only saw her as a prize to punish and protect in the same breath. She would be happy with Elijah, after all. Hadn't she wanted that from the very beginning? And now he wanted it too. He was no man of unshakable devotion, not by nature. Elijah had always known that about himself, better than anyone. He wanted money, glory, status, attention, and he usually got them. But Florence was not just any woman. She was there in the next room, beautiful as ever, more than beautiful. A siren, sleeping, a trusting enchantress, unaware of the power she cast over the men who crossed her path. An angel, wounded and desperate, and she needed him. That was the difference. Before he realized it, Elijah was at her door. His hand hovered over the doorknob, then dropped. With great effort, he turned away and pressed his back against the wood. He slid down slowly, breathing hard, until he sat crumpled on the floor. Why her? What was it about that girl? Those eyes, those strange, soft eyes that seemed to see into something that wasn't even there. She bewitched men who couldn't be more different, men like him, and men like Angus. Chief Minister Angus, a cold, proud Catholic, a man so obsessed with self-denial that he had practically sworn off every earthly pleasure, except drink, and yet he had fallen, collapsed into lust, into sin, all just from being in her presence. And Elijah was not like him. His looks had never failed him. His smile had earned him many favors. Women adored him, and in return, he'd taken all the pleasures offered, without shame, without promises. He lived easily in the flesh, laughed in it, relished it. But Florence was just confused, and now she was sleeping behind this door, his in a way that she'd never been before. And still, he sat there, fists clenched, heart hammering, mouth dry, wanting. Elijah could have any girl he wanted. He always had. Blonde or dark, innocent or corrupted, rich or poor. He'd had them all. And yet she was still there, in his head, stubborn, unshakable, even now, even after he'd had her, once, even after the marriage that was meant to polish his reputation, elevate his name in New York's high society. That union, formal, empty, hadn't stopped him. More than once he'd found pleasure in beds not his own. And it had always been easy, always forgettable, but not her, never her. And maybe it wasn't even her. Maybe it was the fact that he couldn't have her again, that she didn't belong to him, and never really had. He could see it in her eyes. She was damaged now. Whatever had happened between her and the minister had changed her, marked her. She was still soft, still lovely, but something inside her had been rewired. Angus had done that. That old bastard, so holy, so cruel, had managed to do what no one else ever had. He'd crawled into her affections and taken root. Elijah remembered what Florence had been like before. The girl with the shy smile, the bold laughter, the warm skin untouched by fire and fear. But now she was quieter, stranger, still beautiful, but not whole. And somehow that made him want her more. Somewhere deep inside, Elijah knew all of this. He knew. And yet the only thought that kept echoing in his mind, the only thing that clung again and again, louder than doubt, louder than guilt, was this: I can fix her. He could make her forget. Forget Angus. Forget everything. Forget every man but him. The young man was confident. He always had been, and he knew that if he simply opened the door, if he slipped into the room, sat beside her on the bed and kissed her awake, if he touched her the way he knew how, caressed her the way no one else ever had, if he whispered the right words in the dark, coaxed her with skin and warmth and pressure until she melted, then yes, she would moan, she would plead, she would forget Chief Minister Angus Brady. Elijah believed this. He believed it completely, and yet, for the first time in his life, he paused, not out of fear, out of something worse, conscience. She was defenseless, lying just beyond the door, exhausted, battered, broken. She had nearly died. She had wept in his arms. She was not herself, and yet he wanted her. God help him, he wanted her. But everything inside him was spinning now, off-kilter, frenzied, the sleeplessness, the guilt, the possessiveness, the aching, roaring hate of the fact that her heart still did not belong to him. It belonged to a man who had hurt her, to a man who had sentenced her to death. And Elijah? Elijah was the one sitting outside her door, invisible. That thought tore at something deep in him. He had to have her, even if it meant taking her against her will, even if it meant becoming the very thing he had sworn to protect her from. Oh, how wrong it was! He knew it! He knew! And yet as he sat there, fists clenched, heart thudding against the wood of the door, he began to recognize something in himself, something terrible, a man he had never imagined he could become. A desperate, obsessed, cold libertine, a man rejected, and perhaps, God help him, perhaps he and Angus were not so different after all. Perhaps it was her, perhaps she was the thing that turned men into animals, into creatures clawing at control, hollowed out by wanting. And yet, a new thought crept into Elijah's mind, a cruel one. Perhaps she deserved it, not the tenderness, not the patience, punishment. The moment it struck him, he hated himself for it. His thoughts spiraled, sick and shameful. He pictured bursting through her door, holding her down, shouting at her, telling her she was wrong, that Angus wasn't her savior, that he was, that she had chosen badly. He imagined breaking her illusions with the same violence the minister had used, giving her a new narrative to believe in, his. The images in his mind grew darker. Rough hands, ripped fabric, her obedience. He dropped his face into his hands, breath shaking. God, what was wrong with him? She would probably like it, wouldn't she? That was the lie that crawled up from the pit of his stomach. She liked being a victim. She liked cruelty. She liked him, Angus, because he had been cold, brutal, because he had marked her. But Elijah could be that too. He could be the villain. He could be worse, a beast, a storm, a punishment she never asked for. His fists tightened in his hair. What am I becoming? He had never thought himself kind. He had never prided himself on virtue. But this was new. To love and hate someone in equal measure. To want to hold and hurt. To need someone so badly it made you cruel. He was a rejected man. And oh, wretched are all rejected men. Wretched is the one who, for the first time in his life, tastes that fatal fate. Elijah heard the engine before his mind could catch up. A car. It was too late to hide. Too late to think. His heart jolted, adrenaline flooding his veins like ice. Steps. Crunching across the gravel, approaching the front door, he jumped to his feet, bracing himself, body tensed with the instinct to fight. Whoever it was, they wouldn't touch her. He'd make sure of it. Then, click. A key slid into the lock. His blood froze. He already knew who it was. No one else had a key to this place. The door swung open with a hollow creak. And there he was. Angus. He didn't storm in. He didn't raise his voice. He stepped into the room like he already owned it, because he did. His eyes, pale and cold, drifted slowly across the space, assessing. They paused on Elijah, who stood rigid in front of the bedroom door, but only for a moment. Then the minister's gaze moved on, indifferent. sweeping the lodge with the slow precision of a predator scanning his territory. He stepped further inside, not even looking back, and then, in that low, unmistakable voice,
"Where is she?"
She's safe.
He gathered what breath he could. His chest ached, but he forced the words out with strength, with defiance. Angus finally turned to face him fully, one brow arched, faintly amused, cold.
"I strongly doubt that she can be safe with you."
But she can be safe with you.
Angus scanned the room once more. Quick, calculated, dismissive. He didn't answer Elijah's accusation, didn't even acknowledge it. His eyes returned to the young man standing in front of the bedroom door. Elijah shifted instinctively, just a step, subtle, but Angus saw it, a protective step, toward her, blocking him.
"Don't be an idiot, Elijah. Get out of my way."
She's not yours to have.
He could feel the rage in his throat, choking him before the chief minister even touched him. Angus smirked. His gaze dropped, just briefly, to the door between them and the girl as he closed the distance.
"Judging by that door, I don't see her being yours either."
Elijah didn't think. He just moved. His fist lashed out, wild and furious, toward the chief minister's face, but his body was weak, wrecked, nothing like the man who had once stood in robes and certainty. His strength had bled out over the past 2 days, through cuffs, blood, loss, and longing. Angus didn't even flinch. With practiced ease, he caught Elijah's arm mid-swing, and with the other hand, slammed him against the wall. A single motion, brutal, his fingers closed around Elijah's throat. There was no insult, no dramatic flourish, just the slow tightening of a large, calloused hand. The pressure of a man who had killed before and didn't need to prove he could do it again. Elijah gasped, coughed. His hands clawed at Angus's forearm, legs kicking against the stone wall, but the minister didn't so much as blink. His eyes narrowed, cold, silent, disgusted.
She's sleeping in the bedroom.
His fingers clawed weakly at Angus's grip, and with one final push, more instinct than strength, he loosened the minister's hand, just enough to gasp a few sharp breaths. His eyes burned with fury as he stared into Angus's.
Do you want her to wake up and find out that the man who condemned her to death is now murdering her savior in the next room?
That word, savior, hung like smoke. Angus's jaw tightened, but after a moment he released his grip. Elijah stumbled forward, clutching at his throat, the air scalding in his lungs. The chief minister stepped back, only slightly, but his presence never lessened.
"I don't want to kill you, even though I wish I did."
I'm not following your plans anymore.
He massaged the bruises on his neck, chest rising and falling with effort.
I'm done.
Angus didn't blink.
"If you hadn't followed my plans in the first place, you wouldn't have made it out of the pit alive.
He nodded toward the bedroom door.
And you wouldn't have had the chance to save her."
I didn't save her for you.
The chief minister's eyes flicked back to him, narrowed.
"Did you save her for yourself then?"
There was a pause. Then Angus's lips curled into a sneer of contempt.
"How long before you get bored of her?
Elijah stiffened.
How long before you toss her aside like all the other whores that have passed through your bed? One night? A week? A month? A year? How long?"
Elijah's fists clenched so tightly they trembled. Every inch of him wanted to strike, to punch the smirk off that smug, cold face, but he held, just barely.
Do you honestly believe you deserve her more than I do? You're the one who treated her like a thing.
His eyes burned with fury.
I've been unfaithful, yes. I've used women. But I've never had to tie one up to get what I wanted. How many times, Angus? How many times did you force yourself on her? How many times did you hit her? Make her cry?
Angus's expression was unreadable. Elijah stepped closer, reckless now.
How many times did she beg you to stop, and you didn't?
His lip curled with rage and disgust.
I bet she wasn't even wet for you.
The words landed like a slap.
I bet she hated every fucking second you were inside her.
That did it. In an instant, Angus surged forward. His hands clamped down on Elijah's shoulders, shoving him back hard, slamming him into the wall with such force the plaster cracked.
I warn you, Elijah, if you ever speak to me like that again,
He leaned in, eyes ablaze.
it will be the end of your pathetic existence.
The threat wasn't shouted, it was whispered, and that made it all the more terrifying. Chills swept across Elijah's back, but somehow, through the adrenaline, through the terror, he pushed him off. Angus stumbled a step. Elijah nearly collapsed, legs trembling, lungs burning, fingers still curled into fists that had no strength left. The chief minister turned away, straightening his coat with slow deliberation, and then, with his back still to Elijah,
I wonder if your devotion to the girl would be quite so strong if things at your own home were different.
Elijah stiffened. His eyes narrowed. Angus looked back, just for a second, and saw the shock on the young man's face. Then he smiled, slow, dark, inevitable.
Your marriage with Fleur was always opportunistic. She may have been by your side out of convenience, but the poor girl seems to have fallen madly in love with you. She came to me, Elijah. She begged for your release. She didn't seem to care about what you'd done, about the charges, about the accusations.
He turned to face Elijah, eyes gleaming with cold satisfaction.
She told me that her mother had secured her a small fortune, enough for the two of you to disappear, to leave New York, to start over.
He shrugged.
Of course, I told her I couldn't simply release a criminal back onto the streets, but she was persistent.
Elijah stood still, frozen, pale, trying to process what he was hearing.
She said you'd changed, that if I let you go, you'd become a better man, a husband, a father. Your Fleur is pregnant.
The words struck like a blow to the chest. Elijah blinked, once, twice. He looked at Angus as if the chief minister had started speaking in tongues.
A child?
Angus's smirk was slow, calculated.
I have arranged for her to wait for you at the end of the forest, in 2 days.
He stepped closer.
She assured me she'd have packed everything the two of you need. You'll leave the city immediately.
Elijah's lips parted, but no sound came out. He just stared, completely, utterly dumb. Angus let out a soft, bitter laugh.
You see, young man, it didn't require me to kill you, to get you out of the way.
And what about Florence?
He took a shaky step forward, eyes burning.
What are your plans for her?
Angus didn't answer.
You locked up half the square, had people beaten, imprisoned, publicly in front of the Pope's own messenger just to distract from her escape.
He stepped closer, furious now.
But you can't keep her a secret forever. You're an important man. People watch you. What do you think will happen the first time someone sees you walking through New York with a girl that young?
He let the silence dig in.
She's not your possession. Word will get back to Giovanni. And when he learns what you did, what you faked, he'll ruin you.
Angus stared at him, unreadable.
You won't escape prison yourself. Maybe you should be the one to disappear. Let her go. Let her leave in peace.
That was when Angus moved, a single step forward, and then both hands on Elijah's chest. He shoved him hard, back against the wall again. His voice was low, final.
I would kill her myself before I see her leave.
The word struck like a blade, and then crack. A soft, splintering noise behind them. Both men turned. In the open doorway of the bedroom, Florence stood, barefoot, disheveled, her pale prison trousers barely brushing the floor. She looked smaller than either man remembered. Smaller, and not quite real, like a ghost made of ash and tears. Her eyes, dark and hollow, were filled with something more dangerous than pain. They were filled with clarity. She took a single step backward, into the bedroom again.
You planned this.
She looked at both of them, as if seeing them for the first time.
Both of you.
The chief minister's heart sank. For the first time that night, something inside him gave. Her face, pale, streaked with tears, burning with betrayal, was unbearable, Her suffered beauty, the way she stood barefoot in the doorway like a bruised angel, made him feel a remorse so sharp, so strange, that he couldn't find words for it.
What the hell is wrong with you two?
She shook, eyes wide and blazing.
Why have you both been put on this planet to torment me?
Neither man moved.
You planned this? You both planned this? And now, you want to fight to the death over me? Fuck you both. I don't want either of you.
Angus took a small step toward her.
Florence.
The first time he'd spoken her name aloud that night. But she shook her head.
No. No, no, no.
And before either man could stop her, she ran, fled out the exit door barefoot, disappearing into the night. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Angus turned to Elijah, eyes wild.
You fucking idiot.
He shoved past him, racing into the dark. The woods swallowed him instantly. He scanned the tree line, breath catching, heart hammering. He couldn't see her. The forest was thick, the sky moonless, the air damp and heavy. But then a sound. Small, hurried footsteps, a broken sob. She was close. He sprinted toward the noise.
Florence!
His voice echoed, useless. He heard nothing now but the pounding of his own blood.
Florence!
Still, nothing. Just the thundering quiet of the trees. It was dark, dense and closing in, but he could feel her, every rustle, every breath, the frantic sound of footsteps on wet leaves. She was close, but like a ghost, she slipped through the trees, always just beyond his reach.
Florence!
And this time, he saw her, just ahead. The forest thinned. Moonlight broke through the canopy in streaks of silver, painting her figure in pale light as she stumbled between the trees, breathless, wild-eyed. She looked like a spirit. He didn't want to scare her, didn't want to hurt her, but he had to stop her before she did something she couldn't undo. He reached for her shoulder.
No!
She screamed, recoiling as his hand gripped her sleeve. She tore at the fabric, trying to break free from his grasp, sobbing in raw panic. Angus didn't tighten his hold, didn't drag her back. He just tried to hold her still, gently this time, but her body was trembling like a trapped animal.
Florence, let me speak. Just hear me out.
No.
She turned to flee again, but her foot caught on a root and she fell, hard. Her palms scraped the dirt, knees striking stone.
My dove, are you...
No!
Her voice was sharp now, screaming.
Don't come near me. Stay away from me.
She looked up at him from the ground, hair tangled across her face, eyes brimming with terror and rage and grief. And for the first time in a long time, Angus Brady did not move. She dragged herself across the forest floor, hands clawing at roots, knees raw, until she reached a tree. Curling her back to the trunk, she pressed into it for support, as if trying to merge with the bark itself. Her chest heaved, her eyes burned. Angus stood a few feet away, silent, watching her crawl through the dirt like something discarded. Then he stepped toward her. She flinched.
No. No, don't.
He reached down, hands open, to help her up.
Florence, I never meant for any of this to happen. I just wanted to...
Help me? I don't care whether you meant it or not.
Her arms trembled as she tried to push him away.
You can't help me. You can only hurt me.
She looked up at him, eyes shining with fury.
Go away from me. Burn in your hell.
Angus paused. Then, without effort, he bent down and lifted her from the ground, as if she weighed nothing at all. Her feet hit the dirt. She stood again, and her eyes met his. She stared up into the dark, hollow depths of his gaze. Her hand rose, fingers trembling. She brushed them, just for a moment, against the sharp edge of his cheekbone, and then, crack, she slapped him. Hard, his head barely moved from the impact, but her whole body followed through. Her fists balled. She began to hit him, weakly, desperately, over and over, striking his chest, his arms, his shoulders, anywhere she could reach.
I hate you. I hate you. I wish you were dead. You're a selfish prick. I hate you, do you hear me? You're evil. You're a despicable, rotten, soulless bastard.
She didn't even know where the words were coming from. They just came. Months of silence and shame, days of fear and pain, all of it now, crashing out of her. She pressed her palms to his chest, and with what little strength remained, shoved him.
Get away from me.
He didn't resist. He stepped back just a few feet, but enough. His eyes stayed on her, grave, hollow, quiet. Florence was trembling, her back pressed hard against the tree behind her, as if it were the only thing holding her upright. And then her legs gave out. She crumpled to the ground with a sharp, exhausted thud.
I hate you. I'll never let you touch me again. Never.
Then the tears broke from her fully. She folded in on herself, her breath catching, her voice cracking, her whole body racked with quiet, broken sobs. Angus stood frozen, watching, listening, knowing that all of this had been of his own making. Her misery, her hatred, her collapse. His hands had built it. A terrible ache bloomed in his chest, sharp and slow and deep. He couldn't reach for her. He couldn't hold her. He could do anything for her. But she wanted nothing from him. Nothing but distance. Nothing but his absence. With a low breath, the chief minister sank to the ground a few feet away, his body heavy, his spirit heavier. He sat in the dirt, his back to a tree, his eyes never leaving her. She was curled in on herself, weeping quietly into her knees, and he watched, not to punish, not to invade, but because he could not bring himself to leave her alone. Not yet, not now, not like this.